How many of you consider yourselves left-brained? And how many consider yourselves right-brained? Now, how many of you don't really feel like you fit in one or the other? It's hard, right? So it's this commonly accepted neuroscience concept that left-brain people are logical and organized, and right-brain people are creative and expressive. But the left-right thing never really worked for me, and looks like it doesn't work for most of you either. Well, it turns out this split between left and right brains, between logic and creativity, it's an idea that's actually a false dichotomy and not supported by science. Because the truth of it is you can be no more left-brained than you can be left-lunged or left-kidneyed. We'll get to the research bit in a second. First, I want to talk about how incredibly limiting this idea can be, even though it's not true. See, humans like to organize the world into neat little groups. For one, it's cognitively efficient. Once you understand something about what group they fit in, you don't have to look at individual characteristics about those things. It also helps us predict and understand the world, and it makes us feel better about ourselves, because groups we're in are obviously better than groups we're not. But trying to fit things into groups that don't fit us is incredibly limiting. I understand this problem innately. I often describe myself as fluent in 3 languages: English, math, and music. I started all 3 around the same age, and I don't really remember my life without any one of them. Math just made sense to me. It was so clear and logical. Music made me feel whole. It also had this internal consistency, but it gave me a language to express myself. And English, it gave me the medium of storytelling, using grammar and syntax to weave threads of exotic worlds and daring adventures and feelings that I often first experienced through characters on a page. The symmetry between them was so obvious to me that it seemed like they were just 3 languages describing one world. Now, I also had a faint understanding around this age that I was not what most people considered a normal kid. Whether it was because I was a girl who excelled in math or a kid who'd rather read than go out for recess, I was regularly reminded by kids and adults alike that I was different. What exactly do you think you're going to be when you grow up, they would ask, confounded by my refusal to define a career path they could understand by age 10. Sound familiar? I ignored them and kept doing my thing. In high school, I attended a school for the performing arts, where in addition to studying piano and cello, I got to learn math and science through the language of the arts. I learned torque through arabesques, experienced sound waves by building African finger piano, and understood permutation groups through chord inversions and figured bass. It all made sense to me, but the questions kept coming. You have so many interests. Which will you choose next year? I chose not to choose. In college, I majored in math and theater, with additional concentrations in music, physics, and political science. I used trigonometry to build sets, learned entrepreneurship by producing plays. I split my days between cryptography, chamber music, colloidal particles, and stage combat. Researching, telling stories, creating something from nothing. And then, as graduation came near, the questions came back. What kind of career path are you going to build? It's time you got serious and focused, they'd say. But why did I have to focus? Leonardo da Vinci never had to focus. In the 15th century, the ideal of the polymath Renaissance man came into being, defined as one with unquenchable curiosity. No one embodied this ideal better than Da Vinci. He was an artist who was also an inventor, a poet, a botanist, cartographer, mathematician, and a whole bunch of other things. This polymath ideal grew out of the notion of a universal education, which, sadly, did not mean education for all, but rather education across a broad array of subjects, including science, languages, theology, philosophy, and more, rather than specializing in just one area. It's the basis of what we call a liberal arts education today. So how did we get from there, a world that embraced well-rounded interdisciplinary thinking and supported the development of polymaths, to here, a world where teenagers are expected to pick a specialty that they're going to follow for the next 60 years? Well, for one thing, the Industrial Revolution happened. It was the end of the artisan and agrarian economies and the beginning of the efficiency economy. And as the economy changed, we needed people to develop these narrowly defined expertises. We needed to put them in boxes. So, let's get back to that research that somehow morphed into this pop culture doctrine of left and right-brained people. In the 1960s, a doctoral student named Michael Gazzaniga teamed up with neurobiologist Roger Sperry on a series of experiments with epilepsy patients whose corpus callosum, that bundle of nerve fibers that connects the two hemispheres of your brain, it was surgically severed to prevent seizures from spreading across the brain. One patient that Gazzaniga worked with was shown a square to just the left hemisphere of his brain, but showing it to his right eye. And the patient said he could see a box. But when the image was shown only to the right hemisphere, even though he could still see it and point to it, he was unable to name it. So Gazzaniga theorized that while both sides of the brain are involved in processing an image, only the left side was responsible for articulating what it was. In this patient's case, without communication from the left side, the right side couldn't find the word for box. Now, the main result of Gazzaniga's research was about how much the two sides of the brain have to work together to perform basic cognitive tasks. But a 1973 New York Times article misinterpreted it and instead described it as two astonishingly different persons inhabiting our brain. This notion of left and right brain people, the neuroscientists have been trying to dispel it for 40 years, but it still persists. So, why is this such a problem? Beyond the fact that it's just not true, it's because it forces people into boxes that don't fit them. I can't tell you how many times that I was told I was weird for liking math and theater, as though I was a freak of nature. And I can imagine that a kid who was more interested in fitting in than I was would be less inclined to cross that chasm if it meant they were singled out as strange. What happens to a child who's branded as brilliant at chess, but secretly has a desire to try out for the school play? Or the adult who's developed an identity as a creative, but actually has an interest in technology and computer science? How much are we missing out on by forcing ourselves into these artificial categories? 2 years ago, a friend sent me this YouTube video called How I Do Math. It was created by this actress who also started a nonprofit focused on helping girls to love math. Her name was Kate Scott Campbell, and she was tall and a redhead and split her time between these worlds of math and theater just like I had 15 years ago. And I decided I had to meet her. So I flew out to Los Angeles and we spent the day together. I showed her my tattoo of a Fibonacci spiral overlaid with a Kandinsky-inspired geometric print, and she showed me her web series that she created and produced about being a math tutor. We realized that we were not alone in our weird interdisciplinariness, and we suspected there might be more of us out there. So we started a podcast called The Limit Does Not Exist that celebrates all these people who refuse to focus and instead embrace their curiosity and follow it down rabbit holes of their own choosing. We interviewed a computer scientist who became a filmmaker using algorithms to build animations, a painter who followed her curiosity into a natural history museum and became an online science storyteller, a filmmaker and venture capitalist who's simultaneously building the technology of virtual reality while creating a new form of storytelling within that technology. Clay Christensen defined this way of thinking and working across the disciplines as the power of associating, which forms the backbone of his innovator's DNA. Nilofer Merchant frames this as each person's onlyness, that unique thing that they can harness to embrace their power for good. At The Limit Does Not Exist, we call these people human Venn diagrams, people who live at the intersection of multiple interests and create their own inspiration out of connecting seemingly disconnected ideas, questions, and fields. But the name doesn't really matter. What matters is this is what's going to power the future. The Industrial Revolution is long gone, and these narrowly defined jobs that were predicated on the efficient utilization of land, labor, and capital are disappearing. And in their place are jobs that are using people's creativity and innovation to add value. We are at the beginning of the next renaissance. So if you feel like you don't fit in a box, this is your permission to say screw it and to find your own interdisciplinary path. And if you find yourself trying to put other people in boxes, your kids, your colleagues, strangers you meet on Tinder, stop it. It's preventing you from embracing the full expression of their humanity. Oh, and me? What did I grow up to be? An entrepreneur, writer, public speaker who writes computer code and sings Gregorian chant. You know, just a classic human Venn diagram. Thank you.